Tariffs are back in the spotlight with a 90-day extension to President Trump's reciprocal levies set to expire just over 2 weeks from now. With global markets on edge, as trade and geopolitical tensions simmer, the stakes couldn't be higher. We're coming to you live from the AIIB's annual meeting in Beijing. This is Insight with Haslinda Amin. Now, we speak exclusively with Indonesia's Finance Minister, Sri Mulyani Indrawati, about the delicate balancing act of sustaining economic growth while keeping the national deficit in check. Also ahead, Yasuto Watanabe, director of the ASEAN +3 Macroeconomic Research Office and Japan's former senior deputy vice finance minister. He joins us for an in-depth conversation on regional economic challenges. And later, we're joined by Campbell, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State during the Biden administration. We discuss whether China could seize on growing concerns among allies about Washington's reliability. We're coming to you live from Beijing. Markets enjoying a moment of calm as the truce between Israel and Iran appears to be holding. Investors also focusing on the prospect of Fed rate cuts. Let's get more with Avril Hong in Singapore. Avril, what's going on?
Yeah, we are seeing that calm you speak of. To be fair, Asia stock markets had already been fairly resilient even amid the Middle East conflict, but the ceasefire does appear to be holding, as you say. So a bit of a bounce you're seeing in stocks in the region, an extension of already yesterday's gains, but the focus also does seem to be shifting towards that upcoming tariff deadline. July 9th is D-Day. Aside from that, we are seeing the dollar continuing to come under pressure, extending the declines from earlier this week. Some of it had to do with Powell's comments. That's helpful for much of the Asia FX space, but keeping an eye on oil prices as well. It's a tick up we're seeing in the Asia session. This is following on from 2 days of declines, which were their steepest since 2022. Now flip the board and take a look at the Treasury market reaction as well to Powell's comments, because we saw those gains pretty much across tenors. And in the Asia session, the policy-sensitive tenor is extending gains. Our strategists at the MLive team flagged that, Treasury markets run the risk of getting ahead of themselves once again, because if you think about it, Powell is pretty much just reiterating what he said last week, that commentary that they're not rushing to cut rates. Take a listen.
Despite elevated uncertainty, the economy is in a solid position. Overall, a wide set of indicators suggests that the conditions in the labor market are broadly in balance and consistent with maximum employment. The effects of tariffs will depend, among other things, on their ultimate level. Increases in tariffs this year are likely to push up prices and weigh on economic activity. For the time being, we are well positioned to wait to learn more about the likely course of the economy before considering any adjustments to our policy stance.
That being said, he does seem to be signaling that an earlier rate cut could be possible if we see weaker inflation, and markets are now pricing a little over 2 rate cuts for this year. Has.
Avril Hong, thank you so much for that. Now, let's get to our guests. Exclusively joining us here at the AIIB annual meeting in Beijing is the Indonesian Finance Minister, Sri Mulyani Indrawati. Minister, good to have you with us. We just had Avril talking about how Fed Powell is looking at inflation, and that's keeping him on hold. For Indonesia, with oil prices currently up, we saw how it surged at about $80 a barrel. How concerned are you, and how that might play out into your economy?
Well, the geopolitical situation and has this implication very seriously to many of the economic indicators, oil price, commodity price in general, inflation, potential inflation if the commodity is going to be disrupted, just like what happened in Ukraine war. And then it will lead to the monetary policy of many of the major countries. That definitely will affect economy all over the world, including Indonesia as an open economy. So we are currently watching very carefully the development on the market, whether this is on the oil price. This is one thing which is affected directly to our subsidy, but also our revenue at the same time.
And what oil price might it be
well,
complicated for you?
Well, budget 2025, we are using the $82, which is for almost the first 5 months of this year. It's much below that one, even close to the 16. Now it's jumped to 78. So basically from the budget point of view, it's still within our assumption. But we do hope that the situation in the Middle East is going to be getting calmer and the truce that is going to be held. And there will be a solution that can create more certainty. At this very moment, we don't want to have more additional uncertainty, which is coming from especially geopolitical situation. As of the economy, I think the decision by the Fed of holding the rate, it is actually predicted from the point of view that higher for longer is still stand there, although a couple of time is already indication of lowering the rate. But we do hope that this is going to create more communication in terms of the direction of the policy of the Federal Reserve, and at the same time also creating an expectation about the movement of US dollar.
Your fiscal policy and your fiscal position is actually in focus. Talk to us about expectations for your budget deficit. We know the target is 2.5%. Are you on track? Are you likely to have it at 2.5%?
We are still at the 2.53% designed for this fiscal year. Of course, President Prabowo, as the new president, he initiated some of the program, which is already discussed as well as communicated publicly, whether this is on a free meal program. Now we're also establishing this people's school, especially for the poor children. We also have the cooperative at the village level and also housing building 3 million. We've already calculated and designed this program. Not all of them is going to be executed in this fiscal year. Some of this program is going to be like a continue multiple years.
But spending is expected to increase in the second half of the year.
The first half of the year, in fact, actually the spending is relatively slower because of the new ministries, and we also cut budget for the efficiency of 300 trillion rupiah, and now we're reallocating for many of these major national priority program. So from the budget point of view, the spending, even though maybe the perception optic from outside as if there is a new initiative, new spending, but we continue holding the discipline right in this case, meaning that the total posture of the budget is still the same.
So 2.5% budget deficit intact,
It's
unlikely
still,
to rise further even later this year.
If there is a change, just like last year, if we communicated to the parliament, which is going to happen in the next 2 weeks, it's going to be both on the revenue side, which is declining because of the commodity price, like coal is much lower than 2 years ago. Oil price is also much lower than 2 years ago. Some of the commodity is actually relatively stable, like the CPO in this case. So we are looking at all those areas of the revenue that is going to suffer from the commodity, and then how to compensate from other efforts. From the spending, as I said, we are going to continue maintaining this discipline of the total spending. If there will be like a new initiative, we are going to find where this is coming from, reduction on the other area. And so the deficit is going to be 2.53%. If this is going to be larger, just like last year, we actually expecting 2.7 in this case, and we end up with much lower last year.
How about next year, 2026? Might your budget be similar to what we're seeing this time
We
around?
will continue adhering this principle of prudential policy and fiscal discipline. President understands that in order to sustain and supporting his program, especially the one which is very important structurally for Indonesia, with improving the nutrition, education, some of the basic infrastructure, food security, energy security, this will need a healthy and sustainable budget. So we always continue discussing about, okay, this is the new priority, which area that can be reduced. That's why we are going to have both the fiscally still sound and discipline, and at the same time communicating effectively to the market.
There are concerns in the market that it is a president who is overreaching, messing up your budget in a way, and also messing up plans, your tax plans. Is there reason for markets to be concerned, investors to be concerned, and reacting the way they did before?
Well, the word messing up is, I think, too strong. No, because our law, the state finance law, is actually the ultimate power of the state finance is actually at the hand of the president. That is actually stated since 2003. But how then the interaction between president, Minister of Finance, and the budget itself is actually as a new president. He wants to know so many things in detail. And of course, he also have a very legitimate question. Why our revenue is still low, even comparing to the ASEAN? So he wants to know more detail. So we provide him with all information so that he knows exactly where the problem is, structural, fundamental, or this is more like a leadership or governance. So we are going to be able to then address those issues. On the spending side, he also has skepticism about effectiveness of the government spending. This is prone to inefficiency or corruption. So we also provide all the program executed by both ministries as well as local government. Once he convinced and look at the detail, then he said that, okay, we will then designing this program. So I don't think this is messing up. He want to know, and he want to make sure that this is aligned well with his priority.
Let's talk about revenue. You talked about concerns about slowing revenue. How do you boost revenue? Because we know that even dividends from the SOEs are now going to Danantara, and spending is rising. How do you boost revenue?
Well, we have a couple of shocks early this year. First, because we're running a very high commodity price back in 2022 and 23, some of those companies, maybe what you call it overpaying when they use the same commodity price level when they are paying the tax in 2024 or even 2025. So we have to repay them back because the price is not as high. Like coal used to be $240 per ton. Now it's only $140, so $100 lower. What does it mean? That means that they are going to adjust in terms of their tax payment. And then also some related to this policy, like the VAT, which is not being implemented widely from 11 to 12. And then Danantara, who's now managing the dividend of all the state-owned enterprise. We calculate all the shock or the revenue foregone that we are having. Then we look at the spending side. On the additional effort, how to compensate this revenue which is losing because of new action or policy or rule, then we are now creating a joint task force to look at all the potential revenue which is coming from enforcement, leakage, compliance. These are all the ones that we are now looking more carefully and in detail, including on the digital taxation using the platform and so on. On the spending side, as I said, when the president has new priority, we are going to then look and ask how we are going to finance this priority, still within the maximum envelope that we've already informed the president as well as the parliament. This is the maximum spending that we could actually spend for this year. So if you are going to have a new priority, which one that you have to sacrifice in order for us to finance?
What's the thinking on bond issuance? Is there any plan to reduce it, use your cash reserves to plug the gaps in the budget?
We have cash reserve for sure, and this is something that we've already making sure, especially with the global environment. We don't want to be cornered in the market, and that's why some of the treasury function that we are having is there is a cushion within our cash reserve. At the same time, we are going to make sure that many other, including the treasury function, movement of the exchange rate, movement of the yield, as well as the cash flow, these are all become one of the most important. In terms of our issuance, we communicated very clearly to the market that we are still financing 2.53% of GDP deficit. So number of issuance is going to be still the same. If we are going to report to the parliament, if there is a little bit widening, let's say to 2.7, just like last year, then we are going to adjust the issuance.
There's a lack of clarity on where U.S. tariffs will land. We know that you've had negotiations. You were in D.C., I think, in April. Where are you with that? How confident that you'll reach a conclusion sometime soon?
We communicated well and intensively to the USTR, to Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Finance, or Treasury in this case, and we provide them with what we could as a two-country doing a lot of partnership. I think United States really value and appreciate the intention of the Indonesia in providing quite a very comprehensive proposal. This is not only related to tariff, but also non-tariff barrier and investment opportunity.
But what were some of the concessions, the new concessions Indonesia was willing to make, and were there concessions that the US was asking for?
Well, they are talking about non-tariff barrier, right? In this case, any hurdle which is related to the import and additional what you call requirement, whether this is related on a health, quarantine, especially on the food, agricultural product imported from United States when Indonesia is not yet having, for example, like beef and so on. This is related to the standard of the quarantine. We discussed about what is not going to creating downside risk for Indonesia, but also creating an equal opportunity for the US product. We also talking about rare earths or strategic mineral cooperation. So there are so many, it's not concession, more like offering of the partnership that the United States can see Indonesia as a valuable partner.
Are there proposals or concessions that could possibly jeopardize your relations with China?
No, I don't think so. I think China is coming because we offer all those policy which is actually equally applied to all countries. So in this case, if China see that the Indonesia have this policy and they come to Indonesia, whether in terms of the FDI, like in some downstreaming industry on nickel and others, the United States can have the same thing. And if we are looking at whether this is on a battery for the electric vehicle, they have many, both technology as well as capital. So we open evenly for both, and this is not like one's providing the opportunity at the cost of other. Indonesia is open for all because we are non-aligned, both in politics as well as in economy.
Minister, when you take a look at the markets in Indonesia, there was a massive meltdown on the potential, I guess, exit, your exit from the position of finance minister. Is there clarity? Is there confidence you are here for the longer term?
Well, there is always like a question regarding so many things when change happen. I think this is the new leadership. It's different in terms of the leadership style from the previous government, but in terms of the clarity of the direction that the Indonesia needs, which I think fundamentally we need to invest more on human capital like education, health, free meal, nutrition. We need to have a self-sufficient food because Indonesia is a large population and we also have a fertile land. We also need to have a self-sufficient or in terms of what you call it, security on energy. Not because we are not we are insecure, but we know that we have a huge potential. And when we say that, that means that we are strengthening our economy. We are inviting others to come to Indonesia. In terms of the budget support, we are very clear. Indonesia has been evolving in using our budget instrument, whether this is on a public-private partnership on the infrastructure. President Jokowi at that time, everybody was very, very worried about the new capital, about the toll road in Sumatra. But we are actually able to continue providing clarity what instrument and what does it mean in terms of the risk of the budget.
So fair to say that you and President Prabowo are in line. There's no threat of you leaving the position. You are in that position for a longer time.
We have a very good relationship. We have a very professional, and we, by obligation, Ministry of Finance and I, as a Minister of Finance, provide all the necessary information. President Prabowo is very open, very frank in discussing what he wants, but at the same time he also value the input coming from us. As long as we are providing that this is exactly what is happening, this is the figure, this is the problem. If it is the problem in the figures, in the number, he will asking and questioning why it's this way. If it is the problem on the governance, then we said, is it the problem internally within the Ministry of Finance, or this is related to the more wider, for example, like legal certainty or compliance and so on. So I think it's a very fair and a very good, cordial, professional, and I think I'm confident that this is going to serve President Prabowo well as serving the Indonesia
and confident
well.
You'll get to 5.2% growth this year.
Well, we are aiming for that because the downside risk because of many of this global situation. IMF is already revising down the global economy Many countries, including United States, is going to be discounted. Indonesia is no exception. We were predicted it's only 4.7. We tried to counter-cyclical. We mitigate that one. So we launched, for example, counter-cyclical measure in order for us to stimulate consumption, investment, very important, when we cannot rely too much on the export. But export is still growing around 7%, which is good.
Minister, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Very
Indonesian
nice.
Finance Minister Sri Mulyani Indrawati there, live with us from Beijing. Now, still ahead this hour, insights on the latest developments in the Middle East with former U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell. And of course, I speak exclusively with the ASEAN +3 Macroeconomic Research Office Director about the roadblocks to Asia's trade integration. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. You're watching Insight, coming to you live from the AIIB annual meeting in Beijing. Now, earlier I spoke exclusively with AIIB President Liqun, who said free trade defense remains the strongest defense against rising tariffs.
I invited the United States and Japan to join, and I had extensive discussions with them. Quite a lot of people were my old friends, right? We understood each other. So I respect the decision-making of any sovereign government, but I assure them, for whatever reason you choose not to join, it's not a problem. We can work together. For instance, as you know, we work with the U.S. and the Japanese financial institutions, and we are open to the professionals from U.S. and Japan. They are working very happily in our institution, and some of them are taking very important positions. Financial institutions and business companies are welcome to compete in the international competitive bidding. So we are inclusive.
Your member countries are now grappling with the issue of tariffs. Are you seeing heightened lending this year, for instance, from member nations needing more funds as a result?
Tariff issue, certainly, I hope it will be eased, if not completely worked out. Tariff issues will certainly impact on some of our member countries, right? But also, I find this is going to lead to a different kind of scenario of global development. If the tariff is an issue, the best way to deal with the high tariff issue is for a group of economies to be working together, maintaining free trade. So in terms of the geography, population, resource endowments, I think ASEAN and the GCC and Central Asia, these countries can work together without any problem. And on the other hand, the European countries as a bloc is also interested in working with Asian countries. So I think there could be a solution to deal with the tariff. And if that is the scenario we've been looking at for kind of solution, probably tariff issues would be gone later.
AIIB President Liqun speaking exclusively to Bloomberg. Now, still to come on the show, Secretary of State Kurt Campbell weighs in on the state of the Israel-Iran ceasefire after President Trump slammed both sides over early breaches. Keep it here with us. Welcome back. You're watching Insight, coming to you live from the AIIB annual meeting in Beijing. A fragile truce has brought a relative calm to the Middle East. The ceasefire between Iran and Israel, brokered by President Trump, appears to be holding, with no reported attacks in the last several hours. Trump earlier lashed out at both countries over early violations, using language we haven't heard publicly from him before.
I'm really unhappy if Israel is going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
Meanwhile, President Trump is also insisting that nuclear sites in Iran were completely destroyed by last Saturday's U.S. airstrikes. That's even after early U.S. intelligence findings suggest the attacks had only a limited impact. Sources familiar with the assessments tell us that the bombs probably did not cripple the core components of Iran's uranium enrichment program below ground, including its centrifuges. Well, our next guest served as the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State in the Biden administration and is widely credited as a key architect of the pivot to Asia in U.S. foreign policy. Let's get insights from Kurt Campbell, who's also chairman and co-founder of the Asia Group, a strategic consulting firm. Kurt, good to have you with us. What do you make of the U.S. attack on Iran? It did it alone, without consultations with Europe. How are you making sense? How are you assessing that move?
Well, first of all, Haslinda, it's great to be with you. I know you're in Beijing and I'm here in Singapore. Look, the truth is it is too early to tell how to fundamentally evaluate the effectiveness of this campaign. I will say it does raise a few concerns for me, at least. I worry that we acted alone. In fact, we acted at a time that our European allies were right in the middle of a delicate diplomacy with the Iranian team. Now, I'm not sure that would have come to anything, but in truth, in a bipartisan manner, we have almost always sought to take these actions in conjunction with others. And I think what you've seen is substantial public anxiety about this effort to attack alone. I also think, in truth, even though we've declared that it's over, we have no intention of following up, Iran has a voice too, Haslinda. They have to decide. And if we know anything from Iranian behavior is that they can hold a grudge and they will retaliate at some point on their own timing. I think finally evaluating the effectiveness of the strike itself is something that the jury is still out. The initial signals are that, first of all, that the government may have moved some of the uranium in advance, so it may not have been there at all. And secondly, some of the bomb damage assessment suggests that the site was damaged, but not in the manner in which President Trump has described. So those poor guys in the intelligence community have to now speak truth to power. President Trump is going to make it very difficult, though. He's already decided what the outcome is, despite the evidence.
How would you rate the probability of a longer-term security, longer-term ceasefire, longer-term truce?
So, Aslan, I think it is possible that in the very near term, that both Israel and Iran have reasons to perhaps suspend operations. Both are running short of munitions. Iran is badly damaged. Israel is somewhat exhausted after being at war for almost 2 years. And so I think both countries may seek to rebuild and recalibrate. However, I believe that the animosity, the enmity between the two will continue. And I don't believe that we've seen the end of this. We'll likely see actions through other means, whether it's through energy shocks or other steps that Iran has taken in the past through other groups that it controls. But this is not over, Haslinda.
Does the U.S. attack on Iran make you wonder if the U.S. should have, in fact, attacked North Korea's nuclear program before they came up with a bomb?
Oh, I've heard discussion of that back in the 1990s, that we had this opportunity to be able to take these steps. I will point to one thing, however. At the same time that North Korea was developing a nuclear capability, which is undeniably destabilizing, at the same time they had hundreds of thousands of artillery pieces aimed at one of the largest cities in Asia, Seoul, Korea, one of our closest and dearest allies. And so the potential for them to retaliate and create unsustainable damage in the ROK was real. And so at the time, I was in the Pentagon when some of those plans were developed. I will tell you, wiser heads, in my view, at the White House and elsewhere said, you know, the risks here are enormous. It could trigger a wider war. This is not in our strategic interests. Let's try diplomacy. Now, that diplomacy failed, but I think at the time it was probably the best course.
Kurt, the world is also grappling with escalating tensions between the U.S. and China, and actions have gone from tariffs to tech to now student visa bans. Is there a sense that the U.S. under the Trump administration has a clear China policy, a clear China strategy?
So, look, I think the one area, one of a few areas in which there is not real clarity about the ultimate direction of where President Trump wants to take a relationship is between the United States and China. And that's similar to the first term. And I think the reasons for that is that under the Trump tent, there are very different views. You have some people that are very hardline, others that want to cut a deal, figure out how to make progress on trade tensions, and still others that believe we need a larger, more comprehensive arrangement between the United States and China that deals with economic and political issues. I think how that works out over time, no one knows. But I think for right now, I will try to reassure our viewers here is that the steps that Treasury Secretary Bessent has taken with his counterpart, the Vice Premier, at least appear to be stabilizing in the short term. And the worst steps, I was very concerned by the restrictions placed on all Chinese students. I think some of that has been reversed. Technology issues will continue. But I'll say one thing, Haslinda, one of the things that is dawning on both leaders recognize that the United States and China are probably the two most interdependent countries economically, commercially, strategically in the world. Now, they're both uncomfortable with that interdependence, but at the same time, it's harder to separate than both countries realize and understand that short-term challenges associated with decoupling are real. And so I think there is a truce here as well, and a desire at least to maintain a degree of stability in the bilateral relationship going forward.
When it comes to negotiations, it does seem like China has the upper hand, given that it has, a dominant role in the areas of critical minerals, rare earths. Why was there a lack of effort to de-risk in this area for the U.S.?
Yeah. Look, it turns out, Haslinda, that the efforts to diversify in terms of rare earths and other supply chains is unbelievably difficult. It began in the Trump administration, the first one. It continued during the Biden administration. But some of those efforts will take a generation to fulfill. So we are still very much reliant in key areas like magnets, which we read a lot about in China. But I will tell you this, Haslinda, I think it is wrong to say that China in this area has the upper hand. Yes, there are certain areas where China could do enormous damage to American manufacturing and high tech, but it is also the case that the United States can take actions that could really impact the Chinese economy. We are both vulnerable. We are both interdependent, and trying to choose who's more vulnerable is a difficult exercise. Ultimately, if this escalated, both countries' economies would be hurt, and the challenges would not be contained in these two economies. It would spread to Southeast Asia and other parts of the global economy.
Kurt, how worried are you that the U.S. might roll back on export controls on China as a longer-term agreement?
So look, I must say the area that I'm concerned by overall, and I want to support the successive administrations. I believe that a degree of bipartisanship is important. Having elite consensus about our major initiatives in the Indo-Pacific is important. But on the issues that we've seen on tariffs and economic steps that we're taking, not just against China, but against our allies and partners, I think some of that is not well conceived. I think it's created a lot of confusion. The back and forth, it's on, it's off, has led markets and investors and others to be deeply uncertain and anxious about the direction ahead. And so I think what this reveals that in many circumstances, steps are taken in an ad hoc manner, depending on what the mood is like that day. There's no sense of a longer-term strategy. I sometimes lose focus on where exactly specific tariffs are, not just against China, but many of our colleagues and friends across the Indo-Pacific.
And speaking of confusion, Kirk, I mean, how are you making sense of the thawing relations between the U.S. and Pakistan? What might the thinking be at the White House?
Look, these are all such good questions. I will tell you, at the same time that there are important official engagements between countries, there are often private engagements as well. And those are prevalent during the Trump administration. And so you see countries and individuals that engage in Florida with family members and the like. And that undeniably has an impact on where the Trump administration is heading. Now, I just put my cards on the table, Haslinda. I believe the most important bilateral relationship for the United States to get right, and the most critical bilateral relationship for the United States in the 21st century, is likely to be between the United States and India. And so I'm all in on that bilateral relationship. Has huge potential in technology. We have a large diaspora community in the United States. Very important progress has been made. If they sense that we have somehow tilted or maneuvered back to Pakistan, that will lead to some anxiety in Delhi. And I do not believe that's in our strategic interests. Ultimately, what we see is Pakistan more focused on working with China, occasionally Russia. I'm not sure they're aligned with our interests. And so I think they've been effective at playing this game with certain economic interests around President Trump. I do not believe our strategic interests lie with engaging them more deeply. We need certain arrangements for issues associated with combating terrorism and problems in Afghanistan, but our fundamental relationship ultimately lies with India.
Kurt, thank you so much for your assessment today. Great to have you on the show. Former U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell there, coming to us live from Singapore. Still to come, our coverage of the AIIB annual meeting here in Beijing continues with exclusive insights from the ASEAN +3 Macroeconomic Research Office on Asia's trade outlook. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. You're watching Insight, coming to you live from the AIIB annual meeting in Beijing. Now, President Trump's repeated calls for allies to boost their defense spending and rely less on U.S. support is getting pushback from Japan. The policy chief for the ruling LDP, former Defense Minister Itsunori Onodera, told us exclusively that Japan should focus on enhancing the quality of its defensive capabilities instead of chasing Trump's spending target.
There are many cases where the equipment doesn't arrive, even after we've already placed orders, and in some cases, paid for them. Many people think you can build up defense capabilities just by throwing money at it. But in reality, it's not that simple.
Joining us now is Yasuto Watanabe, Director of the ASEAN Plus 3 Macroeconomic Research Office. He previously served as Japan's Senior Deputy Vice Minister of Finance. Good to have you with us. We had the pushback from Japan when it came to Trump asking for defense spending to be raised to 5%. What's your take on it? I mean, Japan has the right to push back.
Actually, this is one of the negotiations that's still going on, and also for this is the initial stage. And it is a kind of comprehensive discussion, so with whether to monitor how the things going on.
But in terms of Japan's role, should it or shouldn't it be raising its defense spending?
To some extent, in the context of the recent international situation, it should, but to what extent, that's the question for the both sides, yes.
How are you assessing Japan's economy?
Japan's economy is stable because of the aged society. I have here the old parent in Hokkaido. It's not easy to persuade them to buy a new car or a new house, but they are still keeping the same, saving or the same expenditure. In that sense, very stable. Yeah.
In terms of the moves made by the BOJ, has it made the right moves in holding off?
At this moment, still the time horizon wise, we're making the wise decision, I hope, and also for the monitoring carefully of the Japanese the CPI and also the labor market situation there.
Yasuto, you assume this position that you have currently about 4 weeks ago.
Yes.
So kind of new kid on the block, baptism of fire. What do you deem as the biggest challenges for ASEAN Plus 3?
Okay. Yeah, currently, the ASEAN Plus 3 economy, that's my stakeholder, namely for the 10 ASEAN countries and Japan, China, Korea, is still the very robust economy. And about the 4% increase of the GDP for this year, next year, and supported by domestic the economy and also the investment. So the lot of the turbulence or the potential risk came from the outside exogenous things, such as the geopolitical tension, like we observed the last 2 weeks, and also for the negotiation with the U.S. trade policies.
How detrimental would those tariffs be? We don't know yet where tariffs will land, but even for a country like Singapore with no trade surplus with the U.S. will be slapped with tariffs. How might this play out for the region?
Yeah, it's better to ask the U.S. side, not that question to me. But
how would the impact be?
Impact, we have here, the AMRO is the surveillance arm, so that we have here some database analysis. And this year, the negative impact if the case of the 2nd of the April, the intention will be implemented, maybe 0.25% negative impact of the growth of this region, and also the 0.5% of the negative impact of the GDP for this region. Yeah.
We know that supply chains are getting tweaked because of the changing landscape. I'm just wondering, what's the outlook for trade? How might that look like with competing blocks in the environment?
Actually, the private sector have a more complex and not necessarily for they are aligned with some blocks. And also for the economies on the ground is still the healthy actively. And the policy maker side is try to adjust and enhance and facilitate it. That's the regional cooperation. That's us, the ASEAN Plus C finance process. Yeah.
Of course, when it comes to the ASEAN economies, they're not just navigating the challenges with the US, it's also with China, navigating the two big powers. How might this play out?
Yeah, actually, the two of that countries, the big partner, the trade partner of the ASEAN Plus 3 countries. But if you look at the export destination from the ASEAN Plus 3 region, US is now count for the 15%. But the intra-regional trade is 45% and still growing. So the more, international, intra-regional trade and also for the investment we observe.
Because when it comes to exports, we know that the likes of Cambodia, the likes of Vietnam are already seeing a huge impact. And just wondering, in terms of countries that will be impacted in a huge way, what's the coping mechanism? What measures can be adopted?
Yeah, one is of course for the happy conclusion of the negotiation with the US, that's one, and also for the more the intra-regional the connectivity. Actually, the connectivity is today's the AIIB theme, so that's quite the timely one. And also for the good thing is our regional authority has still quite the good ample of the policy space, and also for tools and resources and willingness. That's the bright part.
AMRO has said that the region needs to be better integrated into the trade as a response to the tariffs we're seeing from the US. Talk to us how that can be achieved.
But it of course depends on the private sector decision. The policymaker side is facilitate or the promoted. But it's quite natural in the same time zone, and also for the logistically very, how can I say, already developed. So the better to have it in-depth trade and also the investment and the financial flow within the region.
Where is the region in terms of the measures that need to be adopted? How soon do you think they can?
Always we need plenty of time to promoting of that integration. But if you look back for the last 2-3 decades of the progress, was quite a big one. So if we want to go far, we'd better to work together. Yeah.
Right now, all eyes are on the Israel-Iran ceasefire. And as we heard from conversations earlier, there is a chance that tensions may erupt again, sending oil prices higher. How are you assessing the risk from higher oil prices to this part of the world?
Yeah, especially for the ASEAN Plus 3 region, this is kind of the global manufacturing side. And also for the many of our member countries, oil importer, and especially of the last week's the incident of the potential threat to the choke point of the Strait of the Hormuz. That's quite important for our own regional economy.
And the biggest risk for the region, would that be a China that's still struggling to find its footing, to reverse its growth?
No, not specifically. In general, our region have quite a sizable impact from those geopolitical tension by way of the market price and also for some logistics.
Yasuto, thank you so much for joining us. Yasuto Watanabe of the ASEAN Plus 3 Macroeconomic Research Office, coming to you live, of course, from Beijing at the AIIB annual meeting. Now, Rakiza CEO Munir Al-Muniri will be joining us exclusively at the times listed on your screen right here from the AIIB. That is it for Insight here at the annual meeting in Beijing. Horizons Middle East and Africa is next. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg.